The NFL season is almost over for the year 2021 to 2022, and I still have no idea what's going on. Homies, what is happening? Thank you so much for tuning into another edition of the Impossible Variety Podcast. This is going to be the inaugural episode of the NFL RANT sub-series. So, oh my god, this is a very jam-packed week. Even though there's no football going on, there's a lot of news stories to discuss, all of which are very important, and you'll get to see why in a little bit. Before we do that, I just want to thank everyone who has tuned in so far to the podcast. It's been awesome to watch it grow over the past few weeks that I've been uploading episodes. I've been seeing a lot of people interact with it and listening to it and everything, and it helps me a lot and makes me feel like I'm making an impact in a positive way on those folks and making you exhale out of your nose in some regard. So thank you for listening if you have been already. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. I hope you exhale out of your nose at least once during this episode. Please make sure that you leave a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and leave a review if you are liking the podcast. It helps me out greatly. And subscribe and follow on there so that you don't miss any episode when it comes out, which is on the weekly basis.
Just as a disclaimer, I do not know all the answers, and I'm not claiming to be the only opinion you should listen to about these matters. Without further ado, let's get into the madness.
All right, so the first story that we got on the agenda today is probably the biggest one, probably the most obvious one. Legendary quarterback for the New England Patriots as well as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady, has retired. Gotta say, the greatest quarterback, probably greatest athlete, honestly, of all time, in my opinion. Tom won 6 Super Bowls with my New England Patriots, which I was very happy about, and won with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 2020 to 2021 season, which
I don't want to talk about.
All joking aside, I was very happy to be able to watch Tom Brady play for the good majority of when I started watching football. I pretty much grew up with Tom as a Patriots fan in the kind of main area, so I was watching him pretty much throughout his career. I even watched those 2 crappy Super Bowls that we should have won. So ridiculous that we didn't win that one because of the stupid helmet catch. I'm watching you, Eli Manning. I'm watching you. But either way, with the help of his teammates and Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft and everything, they cemented their Patriots dynasty. And then Tom Brady was like, you know what? We're done with this. This marriage is over. So he decided to go join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then he won a Super Bowl with the team first year. Like, come on, dude. But, I mean, that kind of just genuinely cements his status as greatest of all time. Because if you can go to a team, like, first year, not only that, but, like, in the opposite conference, in the National Football League and win a Super Bowl, like, granted, he did have a completely stacked team around him and everything. Granted, that was the case. He still did it, so, like, that's pretty insane. I think some of my favorite Tom Brady moments, I mean, obviously, like, my first one is definitely the 28-3 comeback in the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think anything's ever going to top that, ever, really. And if it does, I'm going to be super, super surprised, but just absolutely insane feat to come down to the wire against the Atlanta Falcons, come from behind, basically have to march their way back into it, trudge their way through the trenches, and absolutely come back in that game. I watched that whole game, and it was by far one of the most ecstatic electrifying moments I've ever seen as a football fan and a New England Patriots fan, and that combination just kind of like amplified it. The Seahawks Super Bowl was also a very good memory as well. He led them on a drive to get them back in the game. It was kind of overshadowed a little bit by the Malcolm Butler interception and everything, but we can't discredit Tom Brady, and we can't ever count him out and everything. So I will say that I'm very grateful to him for that. But here's something that happened the other day. So he announced his retirement on an Instagram post and everything where he thanked many people, his trainer, Alex Guerrero, many folks in his life and everything on his accomplishments in his career. So he did like 3 pages of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which are his second team that he played on in his career in the last 2 years of his career. And he thanked them for like a total of 3 pages. And so people were thinking, okay, well, he's obviously going to mention the Patriots somewhere. No, he didn't. So a lot of Patriots fans were salty about that because they're like, okay, you spent most of your career, 20 years on the Patriots, and you're not even going to like mention them one time. Now, as a Patriots fan myself, I was looking at it. At first, I was a little bit salty about it, but then I thought, like he's already thanked us before, especially when he just went to the Bucs and everything. But this was the retirement and everything, and I was listening to a few other remarks about it, and it does seem a little bit intentional that he left the Patriots off there. I don't know why. He did kind of stoke the fire a little bit when he posted about it on his Instagram and everything. He posted about the Patriots post about him and everything. The Patriots posted about him saying what a great player he is, what a great player he has been, and it was Robert Kraft's statement, and he said, "Thank you so much, I appreciate it, yada, yada, yada." It was kind of very general and brief on his Instagram story. And then Bill Belichick later on in the week did a little statement on him and everything, and then Tom Brady responded saying, "Thank you, it's an honor being coached by the greatest coach of all time." So he kind of stoked the fire, but people are still mad about it. As a longtime fan of the Patriots, I was a little bit hurt by it, but I mean, like, I'm not going to expect like a whole thing and everything. I know what he's done for the dynasty and everything, so I'm not like going to lose sleep over it. I'm not going to hold a grudge and everything. And we don't honestly even know what's going to happen either. Maybe he'll have a huge retirement ceremony. Maybe he'll sign a one-day contract and actually retire as a Patriot. We don't exactly know, so we have to wait and see on that front. But boy, 22-year career and everything. He didn't necessarily go out on top, but he did say a few years ago that he would retire when he sucks, but he doesn't suck, and he's still retired. But what a legendary career from a legendary athlete and football player, and the league is going to miss him. I'm going to miss him terribly. I was a little gut-wrenched when I heard that, and I'm curious to see how the league is going to look in the future. All right, so the next story we got is a little bit, I don't want to say it's controversial, but it's a little bit controversial. The reason being is that everyone's going to complain about it no matter what, so we're just going to get out of the way. The Washington football team has now changed their name. They finally gotten the branding done. They finally, after a 2-year process, they have come up with a rename, and the new name for the Washington football team is the Washington Commanders. Everybody give me your applause. So exciting. So they've come up with the name change. They got the uniforms redesigned and everything. They did a reveal conference for it, which, oh my gosh, little side bit. If you watch, there's a video of them revealing the name change and the uniforms and everything along those lines. And I gotta tell you, I saw a meme that was like, it looks like a part of The Office because it's so awkward and weird. Like, they're at the press conference and everything, and it's like, I think it's a small kind of like room of reporters and press and everything. It's not too much of a big deal and everything. It's not a huge gathering, but it's enough so that the press can get it out and everything. They can take pictures, and they revealed it, and there was just like a little tiny like golf clap. It was so funny. But anyways, yes, the Commanders is the new name, the Washington Commies, if you will. Now, that being said, I took a look at it. I took a look at the new uniform design and everything. They kind of changed the logo a little bit. It's not too much, but it's a little bit more kind of structured and chiseled to kind of give it that commanding edge, I guess, if you will. So the uniforms are really, really cool. They've got the kind of old-fashioned uniform that was back in the old name period and everything. They just redesigned it so that it has Commanders on it, and it has a little bit kind of a sleeker edge on it. They have the white uniforms, which I think are going to be their away uniforms. They're kind of gross. I don't really like white uniforms, and this one kind of just looks a little bit bland to me, in my opinion, but that's kind of how that's looking. But I love the black uniforms. I don't know if they're going to use it for their alternate uniforms or if it's their color rush uniforms. I'm not sure, but the black uniforms they have the gold print on there and everything, and they have the Commanders logo on the kind of like left chest area right there. So I'm really kind of stoked that they actually brought in the black uniforms there. But that being said, here's the deal. I will say this right now. The name is fine. I saw something the other day. It was actually a TikTok. People were rating the name change on Commanders, and people were like, it sucks, it sucks, it sucks. Here's what I will say. They renamed for 2 years the team the Washington Football Team. They renamed it to Washington Football Team for 2 years. People got used to it after 6 months and everything. Yeah, it was weird at first. We thought it was hilarious, but we got used to it and everything, and we called it the Washington Football Team. So we're going to be able to call them Washington Commanders. That's just a matter of time. It's going to take some getting used to and everything, but you're going to get used to it. Will you like it at first? No. You're not going to like your kids' babies. Kids' babies? That's not where I was going. Kids' names at first or anything. There are going to be kind of names that you come up with maybe for your kid or something like that, and you're going to be like, oh, that doesn't work, but with repetition and muscle memory over time and everything, you'll get used to it. That's how it goes. I promise you, you'll be fine. Now, I'm going to say this right now, and this is just my hot take. You can feel free to turn off this podcast if you don't like this take, but I'm going to say this right now. If you're still one of those people that says, oh, I'm still going to call them by the Washington Rumpelstiltskins, and might I be exaggerating a little bit? Maybe. Not really, because that's kind of what you sound like to me, but basically, they changed the name for a reason. The term that it was before, I'm not going to say it because it's a derogatory racial slur. They changed it because it pretty much was a racial slur. So that's the reason why they are changing it. If you can't accommodate that, first of all, grow up. Second of all, and finally, if you still say that knowing that people have told you that it is a racial slur and everything, and you keep going, no, it's not, you are the toxic ex here. You're the toxic ex here that wants to kind of keep reinstigating things and keep reopening old wounds and everything. Instead of just moving on with your life and going on to a different thing, you keep going back to the same thing and trying to make things miserable and everything. First of all, you're making other people miserable. Second of all, you're making the person that you're targeting miserable. Third of all, just stop. Cut it out. Grow up. The fact that some people, even to this day, I know it's been a very acclaimed name and everything. I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts about it and everything. It's the year 2022. We don't have to be using that term anymore. We know it's been a racial slur, so we do not have to keep using it. But if you are a listener and you genuinely are like, I think it needs to be the old name and I think it needs to be an old name only, give me a pretty solid reason. I want to hear your reasons and everything. Maybe it is a solid reason. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts on it, but frankly, they changed it for a reason, so that's what they're going to stick with. Now they just got to figure out what they're going to do about their poop water stadium and their stadium pretty much just falling apart. So Washington Commanders, they've got the name changed. They've got everything branded. Now they just got to fix their really dumpy stadium. All right, so our third out of fourth story for today is going to be about the Brian Flores racism lawsuit. So, Brian Flores, in case you don't know about this whole situation, Brian Flores was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins from the years 2019 until the end of this season right here. So, he was in Miami for a total of 2 years. Now, let me take you back to the beginning before the kind of lawsuit was presented, because the way that he exited Miami was a little bit weird. Now, the reason why it was weird is that Brian Flores came from the New England Patriots. He was the defensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. Then he got hired for the head coach job of the Miami Dolphins at the start of the 2019 to 2020 season. Just to tell you how good of a head coach Brian Flores was, the Miami Dolphins went from 5-11 in the year 2019 to 2020 to 10-6 in the 2020 to 2021 season. And then this past season, he downfell a little bit with a 9-8 record, but still, the 2 seasons that he coached, he had winning records. Now, there were a lot of coaches that got fired at the end of the season. I think there was like 5, that got fired at the end of the regular season and everything. Brian Flores is one of them. Here's the thing. The other head coaches that got fired were fired because their teams were genuinely not good, and usually when teams are not heading into the right direction, they'll fire the coach, kind of for good reason. It's not usually the main reason, but it's kind of a big reason as to why some of the teams are failing. For example, Urban Meyer, who just coached for the Jacksonville Jaguars, he got fired before the season even started because of how bad of a coach he was. For heaven's sake, he literally kicked a player. He literally had the worst off-field antics and everything. He was the most infamous coach, I think, in NFL history, and he didn't even last the entire season of his inaugural year of coaching. So there are a lot worse things that people have done. So I'm thinking, why did Brian Flores get fired? I would think that if he was to get fired, it would be because he was not living up to expectations and everything. But Brian Flores literally got the Dolphins a winning record in his 2 seasons when they were a losing record team way before his tenure. So the big question is, why would he even get fired from the Dolphins to begin with? That managerial decision doesn't make any sense to me on a competitive level. So originally speaking, Brian Flores was painted to be the bad guy, saying that he was hard to work with and that he was saying things to Tua Tagovailoa, being like, we should have drafted Mac Jones and everything. Those were initial reports from the kind of inside reporters about Brian Flores' coaching and coaching antics. So later on, he decided to file the lawsuit. Now, the lawsuit addresses 3 primary concerns. The 3 primary concerns are as follows. 1, racial prejudice against black NFL coaches. 2, incentivized losing. And 3, encouraged tampering for Tom Brady. So let me break that down real quick, because that's a lot of kind of charges to kind of bring up all at once. So, as I mentioned in the last story, and kind of touching on it a little bit, the NFL last season started to get into more topics and outward promotion of social justice and everything, and they were kind of trying to tackle the race issue, basically being like, Black Lives Matter, these things are important to talk about, and basically pushing that to the forefront. It was in a lot of commercials and everything. They haven't been doing it as much now than they did last year and everything, and last year with all the unfortunate events that kept happening, especially with the beginning of George Floyd and everything, that was a big reason why some change was kind of put into action. And even on, I don't know if all the fields have it and everything, but a lot of the helmets and the field markings say "and racism" on it, so they've kept that in place. They haven't put too much more attention on it this season, but they did do it last year. So on the racial injustice against black coaches ordeal, he is actually suing 3 teams. One of them is the Miami Dolphins. The other 2 are the Denver Broncos and the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants thing is a little bit complicated because Bill Belichick, the head coach of the New England Patriots actually texted Brian Flores being like, congratulations, you got the job, I think, and everything, because of insider reports. And he basically was like, I think you got the job. But it appears that he made a mistake and he texted the wrong Brian, which was actually intended for Brian Dable. And so he got the job. Brian Flores did not get the job. So I think that was the turning point in which, and the reason why it was a little bit strange was because Brian Flores was like, I haven't even interviewed for the New York Giants job yet. So like, this makes no sense, Bill. So for the Denver Broncos interview, which was before his head coaching job in Miami, he showed up to the Denver interview with John Elway, who is the owner of the Denver Broncos, and he was saying that it didn't seem like John Elway was taking the interview really seriously, and he claims that he may or may not have been in a different state, just to say the least, because we're trying to keep it PG. You can look up the details on why exactly he was quote-unquote out of it, but basically Brian Flores was like, you did not take this seriously and everything, and you didn't even pretty much listen to what I was saying. So that's only the first part of the lawsuit. The second part of the lawsuit is going against Miami again. Now, he is going against Miami because of the incentivized losing aspect of the lawsuit. So basically, if you happened to know what incentivized losing is basically what happens is that the lower you perform in the NFL season, the higher your draft pick's going to be. So this year, the Jacksonville Jaguars had the worst record. They're going to get the first overall pick, which they've gotten that for 2 years in a row because they're awful. And the Detroit Lions are getting the second overall pick because they had the second worst record in the NFL this year. So that's what it happens to be. Now, there's been a lot of kind of conspiracy about, okay, teams, when they're not on a good trajectory to perform well, they'll intentionally lose their games in order to get a better draft pick. When you have that better draft pick and everything, you can start to rebuild and invest in players that are going to be your future. So, for example, the Jacksonville Jaguars drafted Trevor Lawrence, who is a promising quarterback from Clemson University, and they are trying to build around him. So according to Brian Flores, Stephen Ross, who is the owner of the Miami Dolphins, when he was first hired by Stephen Ross, apparently what happened, according to Flores, is that he was offered $100,000 every single time they lost a game so that they would get a higher draft pick in the following year's draft. And he literally looked at him and was like, no, I'm not going to do that whatsoever. You're not going to let me do that. And obviously, he didn't. Why? Because they got a 10-6 record. They had a winning record. So he didn't even take them up on that incentive. And he went on record to say, that's not who I am. I'm here to win football games. I'm here to coach my team so that they can win football games. And it's not fair for them to be spiraling because of the fact that the owner's trying to make us tank and everything. That's not in our nature. And the last thing against the Miami Dolphins, which this kind of entire lawsuit is against the Miami Dolphins besides the two teams in the Denver Broncos and the New York Giants. But the last thing was that Stephen Ross was accused of tampering. And basically what tampering is, if you don't know what it is it basically is the process of getting into contract talks and acquiring other players while they're still under contract. So that's like if now I were to go and talk to, Aaron Donald about joining my team when they're still technically under contract and everything, and they're not in talks of trading or dealing away or anything. Or at least that's what my understanding is of the entire tampering thing. So we found out that on that meeting that they were talking about getting another quarterback, it was Tom Brady that they were trying to acquire, which is kind of funny. But Brian Flores was like, no, I don't want to do that. So that's another thing that he's alleging in this lawsuit. So to take a step back and look at it big picture, I don't think he would be lying about the whole kind of racism aspect of this, in my opinion. I don't think anyone really in that matter would lie about this type of thing, because what does that say about him. He literally said on record that I understand that this puts my coaching opportunities in jeopardy because if I lose this case or something happens, then I might not get offered any type of vacancies or coordinator positions in the future. But he said that he thinks this is very important, and he's literally putting his employment opportunities on the line for the game that he loves so that he can kind of confront these issues. Now, I will say, though, I'm a little bit curious. We're looking at this and everything, and he's putting his opportunities on the line. What happens if this case gets dismissed? What does that say about the NFL and their whole end racism narrative that they're trying to put on? If he loses this lawsuit, what are they going to do to kind of handle this situation and everything? Where's this lawsuit going to go? What's going to happen if perhaps he wins the lawsuit? What's going to happen if he loses the lawsuit? There are a lot of factors coming into play and everything because it's such a huge thing that is kind of being put on the table for everyone to see. And there's a lot of dirty laundry and skeletons in the closet that are being exposed. We don't exactly know what it's going to look like in a few weeks or so or anything, but that's kind of what the situation looks like right now. All right, the final story about the NFL as this season comes to a close. Obviously, we got to talk about the Super Bowl. It's coming up next week. Now, this week's the Pro Bowl, but nobody really watches the Pro Bowl, let's be honest. Maybe they watch the skills competition, but nobody watches the Pro Bowl. But the Super Bowl, boy, quite a few great storylines in this one. It is the Los Angeles Rams versus the Cincinnati Bengals, and oh my goodness, storylines everywhere. The AFC champions, Cincinnati Bengals, being pretty much the underdog all the way through the playoffs, came in, hosted one playoff game, the first playoff game that they've played since I think it was 2012, I think, and the first one that they've won since 1990 or something like that in years. First playoff game that they've won in years and everything. So Cincinnati's already rejoicing. Then they go to Tennessee and they go to the Titans Stadium and they knock off the number one seed as the time expires on a field goal by McPherson. So they've already dethroned the number one seed. And then in the conference championship, against all odds, they go into one of the most daunting stadiums in NFL, in my opinion, in NFL history, at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, and they go into the mouth of the tiger, and they literally go, all right, give me your best shot. Now, a lot of people were thinking, okay, with how the Tennessee game went, they got sacked 8 times. The offensive line was awful with the Cincinnati Bengals. So people were like, okay, this is not going to go well, especially with kind of a few of the mistakes that Joe Burrow made along the way, throwing those picks. They basically were like, I think people were a lot saying it's in Arrowhead Stadium. They were not going to win that game. They pretty much, Cincinnati was counted out way from the beginning. Now, in my personal opinion, can't stand the Kansas City Chiefs. That might just be the New England Patriots fan in me and everything, and the fact that we had to play them quite a few times, but I cannot stand the Kansas City Chiefs. So I was rooting for the Bengals for this one, especially with the huge underdog storyline. And what's really crazy is that Joe Burrow hates the underdog storyline. He basically is he has kind of the underdog mentality, but he downplays it. He's I think he literally has this why not us attitude, but whenever someone asks him about underdog, he's like, whatever, we're just going to go in, we're going to play this and do it. The Bengals have so much swagger going into this Super Bowl that it's kind of admirable, and they deserve to be rocking that swagger all the way because look at all the odds that they pretty much just defied to get to the Super Bowl. They won a playoff game for the first time in 20 plus years. They had a 4-win season last year, and Joe Burrow literally is in his second season after tearing his ACL because of the bad offensive line in his first season. Now, a lot of people also with the Cincinnati Bengals were a little bit concerned because people were saying, okay, well, in the draft, we got kind of a higher draft pick. We're going to draft Penei Sewell, who is an offensive lineman and one of the top offensive linemen in the draft. So they're like, okay, we're going to go draft Penei Sewell. But that didn't happen. They ended up actually drafting Jamar Chase, who was Joe Burrow's LSU teammate, wide receiver at LSU. And people, myself included, literally reacted going, why would you even do that? You're literally not going to be able to do anything. Your offense is going to crumble. But against all odds, I think Joe Burrow actually was in the drafting process. Like, I think he had a little bit of say of who they were going to draft, and he genuinely was like, I want Jamar. So they got Jamar Chase, and like in the preseason, he had a few rough drops and everything, but like during the season, I swear, breaking rookie records in terms of receiving yards and everything. If he does not get Offensive Rookie of the Year, this is me competing against my Mac Jones of the New England Patriots. And like Mac Jones was efficient, but there's no way Mac is going to get Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think it definitely has to go to Jamar Chase just with all the outstanding accomplishments that he's achieved, especially with the Super Bowl now in his first year. So that's only the Bengals storylines and everything, just the underdog mentality. We get to the Los Angeles Rams on the other side. The Los Angeles Rams are one huge super team, but they're like, I don't want to say they're not a good super team, but many people didn't take them seriously. So basically what happened was that they traded a bunch of first-round draft picks of their future years to basically be like, we're all in, we're going to put all our chips on the table, and we're going for a Super Bowl. Apparently it worked because they're going to the Super Bowl, and they're playing for a championship this next coming Sunday. So a few people that they acquired along the way, they got Matthew Stafford, and they traded Jared Goff to the Lions for him, as well as a first-round draft pick. So they got their quarterback that they needed, and Jared Goff wasn't the answer for them, so they're like, we need a better quarterback. They got him. And yes, Matthew Stafford has been a little bit kind of inconsistent over the course of the season. Had a little bit of Detroit left in him and everything, but with how everything was going with the team and everything, they managed to find their way into the NFC Championship and eventually into the Super Bowl. But along the way, they also acquired quite a few named stars. For example, they ended up trading a first-round draft pick for Von Miller, defensive end for the Denver Broncos at the time. So Von Miller, who's already kind of an old age and everything, still got plenty of juice left in the tank. So you already had two of the best defensive linemen kind of in the league, actually, in Aaron Donald and Von Miller on both sides of the defensive line. So that was only one addition that they added on top of Matt Stafford. Then turmoil happens in Cleveland, and Odell Beckham gets released. The Los Angeles Rams find a way to sign Odell Beckham to the Los Angeles Rams. So they are literally a stacked super team, and everyone's like, okay, holy crap, they're going all in. Like, pretty much cap room is nowhere to be seen. So they basically were like, okay, cool. We're just pretty much going to mortgage our future and like give all our future picks away and everything. We don't need to worry about that. We want a Super Bowl now. They went Madden rebuild mode right now. So they must have done something right because obviously they're in the Super Bowl. So what's really nice and everything, and Detroit fans are really, really kind of happy for Matthew Stafford. He's never been to a Super Bowl. He's been on a losing team for most of his career. So, and Matthew Stafford's like a pretty stand-up guy. Like everyone's like rooting for Matthew Stafford because he's never been to a Super Bowl. And the first year he goes to another team that's pretty much in their winning ways, pretty much saying they go to a Super Bowl and everything. And so Detroit fans even are rooting for him. I'm rooting for him even a little bit. Okay, this is kind of a random funny storyline, but I have to share it because it's ludicrously hilarious. So the defensive end, Sam Hubbard, who plays for the Cincinnati Bengals, literally went on record and was like, we're doing this one for Harambe, because Harambe literally passed away and he was part of the Cincinnati Zoo and everything. And he was like, we're doing this one for Harambe. And I was like, and I like had to look it up because I was like, okay, maybe he's just joking around. But Harambe was literally a gorilla in the Cincinnati Zoo, so that's literally why it's so much more funnier to me now. Like, I had to share that because it's so ludicrously funny. But in my opinion, there's a lot at stake here. I think this is one of the most interesting Super Bowls because of all the storylines here. And, like, genuinely speaking, two of these teams, the two teams that we have here, are so likable, in my opinion. Yeah, you could say whatever you want about the Rams and their super team and everything, but, like, they're stacked, and this is going to be a fun game. If I'm going to make a pick on it, it's going to be a little bit of, I'm going to say, in my opinion, the Rams are going to win this game because of how atrociously great their defense is, and the offensive line for the Bengals I don't think is going to hold up, but I'm rooting for the Bengals as well. I'm rooting for both teams. This is like one of the rare instances where I'm rooting for both teams to kind of play their hearts out and play hard for the chance at the Lombardi Trophy and everything. It's really genuinely going to be a good game, and I'm very, very excited for it. I'm going to have to find people to party with when that happens. Not to mention the sick halftime show that is going to take place. That's featuring Mary J. Blige, Kendrick Lamar, Eminem, I think Dr. Dre's in there, and Snoop Dogg. Like, holy crap, this game is going to be insane just all the way through. Either way, super stoked, and honestly, good luck to both of them because they both have worked their butts off to get to the big game, and they're here, and it's going to be a fun game for everyone to watch. Folks, thank you so much for listening to this first episode of NFL Rants. It might be a long one because of the fact that there was so much stories to cover in so much detail and everything, but if you stuck around this far, you are the absolute best, and I appreciate you. So make sure you hit the follow button on Spotify and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Leave a rating and a review, and I will see that, and it'll help me out quite a bit. I appreciate you listening this far if you have. And that being said, be good to yourself along the way. If you're a football fan, hope you enjoy the big game. If you're not a football fan, enjoy the buffalo dip and all the free food that you get at the Super Bowl party. And did I say be good to yourself? Be good to yourself.